Well, for those of you who watch my shorts, you'll have seen that I did a Midnighter recently, and today we are gonna do Apollo. Welcome to Superhuman Customs, I'm Stephen Human. Now, I've always loved the Midnighter and Apollo relationship. I thought it was fun back in the Authority days in the 90s. And then when they were brought into DC Comics, thought it was cool. And they don't get enough screen time, partially because they're basically just a different version of Superman and Batman. But they do have great stories in and of themselves and together. They're awesome. And I got years ago at New York Comic Con, I got a Midnighter, and I've never been able to find the Apollo to go with it. And so when I got that Midnighter, I was like, okay, well, I've got this body from the Superman Injustice that we used for the S and stuff, and I've got this random head that I got with the same lot that I got this figure. And I thought, you know what? He's got a lot of cool details, and obviously we're just gonna do a classic where he's white and he's got the gold, but I think all of the little details will be appropriate for this character. So we're gonna use this as the base. We're gonna put some milliput here, get the symbol with kind of the triangle and the circle. We're gonna use this head and attach it here somehow, not even quite sure. But I think this is gonna look great for Apollo. So let's get going. Let's go ahead and get some of Apollo taken care of here. I'm gonna take some milliput and we're gonna fill in this space here on his chest. Then we're gonna just build up up over his shoulders and on his neck. And that's kind of how we're gonna get all this looking right. And then we'll carve in his symbol and such. So it's gonna look crappy for a minute, but you just build it up and then you get it to where you want it, and then you're in good shape. So that's what we're gonna do. So I'm taking a little bit of water and I'm smoothing all of this out. And you can see how it's starting to take shape. Again, I always do things, handmade. And so things are rarely gonna be perfect. And I'm okay with that. But if you're not, then you're gonna wanna get a 3D printer and you're gonna wanna design some of this stuff, or find somebody who can design something to fit over this, or cut it out. But this is how I like to do it. Do it your own way. Don't be beholden to anybody. Make it the way that you want. But for me, this is what I like, and this is what I'm gonna do. Now we are going to place the circle. So I'm just making a ball. I actually probably make it pretty small. I should make it smaller. That's the thing, is that you think things are gonna be the right size, and oftentimes when you get them on, they're too big. Because they're small figures when it comes down to it. So I'm gonna take a little ball of milliput, put it here in the center, and I'm going to just tap it down. And I'm gonna let it kind of move out, and it should naturally form a circle, not a perfect circle, but as close to it as you can get when you're working by hand. Not bad. One thing I'm gonna do, because obviously this costume has lots of textures throughout, and so what I'm gonna do is, just with the X-Acto knife, I'm gonna just kind of embed some in here so that it looks like it matches. I'm gonna try and keep it nice and simple, but I want this to feel like, once it's painted and stuff, that it matches. So I'm just gonna add some of those in a couple places, and then do like a line right here across to touch them, and a line right here like it's hooking up with the arm. Feel free to do as much or as little of this stuff as you like, but doing things like this will help to make it so that everything kind of feels like it goes together. He's all dry. Let's go get him primed. Apollo's had a couple different suits. Some of them have had detail, some of them haven't, but they all have the white and the gold look. And so that's what we're sticking with here. But I'm gonna add some details. So because sometimes you'll have lines going down that are gold and stuff. So I'm gonna take some of these details, like this belt buckle, and even though it's kind of a Superman sign, because this was a Superman figure, we're going to make that gold. And then we're gonna do the same thing with these little belt things. And I just think it'll make some of these details stand out, which will look really nice. And then everything else will be standard. Up here is gonna be gold, and his shoulder plates here will be gold. So I'm just gonna go through and get this base coat on, and then we will go from there. All right, it's important to show stuff like this. So what happened is that I dropped this guy and he hit right here and he cracked, the milliput cracked. And so what I've done is I've added some fabric paint up here to cover up the crack and make it look like it's another line. It's one of those things where it's like, okay, you know, it's not ideal, but at the very least I can cover that up. And once this is gold, it'll be much less noticeable. But, you know, not what I would have chosen, but sometimes things happen and you just got to deal with it. While the paint on the body is drying, I've actually put a clear coat on it so that we can move on to the head. Obviously, we're going to start with a red base before we do the flesh tone so that we can get a nicer texture of coloring, as we've gotten on some figures lately. Like Cable, for instance, he turned out really nice. So we're going to do the red here. And I'm debating on, once I get the head on it, adding some hair with milliput to darken it, but I'm not sure. Now that he's getting paint on his face, you know, we might be able to just have it work with this. I don't know. It's a great thing about stuff like this is you just kind of figure out what you want, and then you know that you can make changes. Nothing here is permanent, or very little is permanent. Sometimes things are permanent, but you can paint over stuff if you don't like them. So there we go with the red paint. We'll move on to the hair. Obviously he's blonde with very light white. So I'm going to start with a brown, then go to yellow, and then go to white so that we can just get some textures in here that'll look nice. Sometimes he's shown with straight white hair, sometimes he's shown with blonde hair. I want to go with the blonde look. That's my preferred. So I'll go with yellow, and then we're going to really lighten it up with white, but he will be, you know, a light blonde at the end of the day. The thing about customizing is that you have to think about how much effort you want to put into any individual figure, right? So here's a great example. This head is a custom 3D head that came in that lot. And so it doesn't have any of the the spots to put a neck peg or anything like that. And I could form a neck peg. I've learned how to do that. But then I look at it and it's like, okay, you know, he's damaged up here. I've done my best to cover it up. He's not looking exactly as great as I would like. And so do I really want to put in a whole bunch of extra work when I know that I'm never going to move his head, probably not one time once he's on the shelf? So what I've decided to do is I've got some resin here, and I am just going to resin the head in place. Now, this might be something that you don't want to do where you're like, no, he has to be able to move his head. It's like me, I want them to all have free range of movement. You know, they still have to be action figures for me if I'm customizing them. I don't want them to be statues. And so they still have to be toys. But for me, the head is less important. I would prefer them to be able to move their head. But if not, it's not necessarily a non-starter for me. So I don't want to take the time to go through all of that and mold stuff inside. I just don't. I'm not caring about this character quite enough to do that. Plus, he's visually not turning out quite the way I want him. I mean, I still think he looks all right. But so for me, it's like I am okay just resining his head in place. So I'm just going to do that. I'm going to keep it here, let the resin do its job. And then I think it's going to be easier for me to paint the face and stuff at that point. So that's why I'm doing it now as opposed to later. So here we go. Now that I've got Apollo's head resin in place, I've decided I am going to go with longer hair. And so I'm going to do some fabric paint. And I'm just going to go up and add some. And since the head's not going to turn, it doesn't matter. And so I'll just go through and I'll kind of add some of this in just little strands. And it'll take a little bit. But at the end of the day, it'll look more Apollo-ish and hopefully make him look a little older. Because right now with the paint on, he's looking a little bit young. A little bit younger than I would like my Apollo to look. So we'll see what we can do. You can see that I added some hair using that Thor hair that I had from that 10-inch figure that we used on Absolute Superman. So he looks good from certain angles, but you know. All right, let's go ahead and let's get some flesh tone on his face. Let's do the first brushing on I know that this is going to kind of get on the hair too, which is why I want to do it now before I do anything else, so that we can start with this and then we can, you know, fix the hair and stuff before we start doing the other layers. But yeah, so hopefully he'll start to take on the look that we want. Right now he's, I don't know. I'm excited to get the wash on because sometimes he just looks a little bit more feminine than I would like with how the hair turned out. So, you know, sometimes you gotta deal with this stuff and just adapt. So I got all my gear put away for a shoot tomorrow, so I'm just gonna use my phone. So what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna go over this guy with some dry brush, not some dry brush, with some brown wash and add a few details to him, and then we'll dry brush over the top to make it so it's more muted. I found that this really adds a nice layer of realism to the flesh tone. So just gonna do that, add some details, move some things around, and then dry brush over the top. We'll see what we got. All right, I'm gonna put some yellow on his hair now that his flesh tone's looking good. We're just doing a light coat. We're gonna get it all over, and then we'll do a dry brush of white over the top to really lighten it up. Just be nice and simple. Now it's time to get his eyes. So I'm just gonna get in here with a toothpick, and I'm gonna try and touch it really nice and lightly. Because even with a toothpick, you still end up getting too much paint. Like you can try and get a little bit and it's just, it globs it up. So just be aware that eyes are hard and that you're gonna kind of get stuff around. You're gonna have to do some cleanup paint. That's all there is to it. This is a tiny space, and even with a toothpick, you're gonna get too much. And that's okay. So right now he looks like he's got globby eyes. We will fix that. While his eyes are drying, I'm gonna do some white dry brush on his hair to lighten it up. I used a bright yellow and it's still shiny. So this will go a long way to deadening it. So I'm just using an X-Acto knife. The white is kind of dry, but not quite, so I can chip it off pretty easily without taking off the rest of the paint. And I'm just going around the eyelids and chipping it off, and it comes off pretty good. Before I do Apollo's eyes, one thing I want to do is, after spraying him with the sealant, he's lost all of his gloss. I want him to be glossy. So I'm going to go over all of him. I still haven't gotten around to buying a spray gloss, otherwise that was what I would do. But this paint on gloss has worked really great on a lot of the figures, and so I'm just gonna get them all covered. I think it's appropriate for the figure, for the character, to have him be glossy. So we'll do this, and then we will do his eyes, and then we should be done. Unless there's anything else where I'm like, oh, I should try that or something. But I think I'm good with how he's looking. Moment of truth. So I'm getting very little blue. I'm gonna give him blue eyes. I don't know what his eyes actually are, but blue sounds about right. And I'm gonna put it on the toothpick, and we're gonna put it here. Just a little bit. And see how it turns out. The first time I did eyes on that John Kent figure from like 3 years ago, I had to do it like 20 times to get it right. Even after the video, I had to do it again. And now he looks pretty dang good, but this takes a little bit. But you want to get a very little on there. That doesn't look too bad. You just want to play around with it. I'll bring my magnifying glass over here and I'll play around with it a little bit more. Make sure it's looking good. That's not too bad. And there we have Apollo. Now, obviously this guy didn't turn out the way that I kind of envisioned. When the milliput broke up here and I had to patch some things, it was kind of like, you know, had to make some quick decisions. But my main thing is the head itself. I didn't notice until it was painted, especially when I got the eyes in, that it's really more of a manga head. The eyes are a little bit big. And like I had it under my microscope, or not my microscope, my magnifying glass, right? And the eyes were pretty perfect. I was very proud of them. But then when I would pull it back, I'd be like, wow, those are big eyes. So I tried to tone them down. So overall, I mean, I'm not a huge Apollo fan. I really got him to kind of be a part of the Midnighter team, you know, that couple. And so I'm glad that I've got him so the two of them can be together. But overall, this was good experimentation. I learned some stuff. Like I learned that even when I cut in here, once I started drawing, I had them standing up and they drooped a little bit. And so it wasn't quite as straight as when I cut them in. So everything's a learning experience, right? And so you'll get something like this, you'll be like, oh, you know, it looks great in some ways and not in others. And then the next time you make better decisions. And that's what I try and do. So there we have Apollo. Thank you for watching. Hope you guys learned something. I know that I did. We always learn from failure, and that's the most important thing to learn and to know is that when you fail, you learn, and then you don't do it again. I'm Stephen Heumann. Thank you for watching. Check out StephenHeumannAuthor.com for all of my novels, and I'll see you guys soon.